Welcome friends, I'm Yvonne Davis, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about an updated time frame for the impeachment trial and also talking about potential outcomes of the impeachment trial. All right, so before I get started, I just want to say thank you to all my new subscribers. And if you are new to my channel and haven't yet subscribed, please do subscribe. There's always, that red button down there. It's very easy. Just click on that button and also click the bell, because that way you can make sure you're getting notified of all of my videos that are coming out. I also want to say really quickly that after the inauguration, like on January 21st, I went through and I pretty much deleted well, I didn't delete them, but I made private almost every single video that had Trump's name on it or his face on it, because I was trying to erase him from existence. And I realized I probably went a little overboard. So I am going to make public again some of those videos I made, especially the ones related to the more recent events, because you may want to go back and look at that. So, and I might also put some of the links up above just to make it easier for you if you do want to go back and see those videos. All right, so I want to start with what's been happening in the Republican Party, because some people, were very happy to see my recent videos about Trump and saying that his political career is over and he'll probably even end up bankrupt by the end of this year. So things are not looking good for Trump. But then people wanted to know, well, what about the Trumpanzees? That's what somebody called them, the Trumpanzees. I thought that was pretty interesting. And so what I want to say about that is I am going to be doing a video in more depth about what's happening in the Republican Party. And so you won't just know about Trump, you'll also know about what's happening in the Republican Party and many of the top tier players in the Republican Party. That video is coming this weekend, okay? And now what I want to do is I want to go over to the charts, okay? And we're going to be talking about the topic of today's video, which is the Trump impeachment trial outcome update. So the first thing I want to say is I had made the chart for February 8th, and some people said, no, it's going to start on February 9th. And does that matter? And no, it doesn't matter. The change in the planets are not going to be significant enough in one day to make a difference. But as we get closer, I may actually do another video that will pinpoint the exact time that the trial begins, because we can get a lot of information from that. But I'll wait until we know the exact time that the trial begins, because like I said, that will give us a lot of information about how it will go and the ultimate outcome. But I also saw a comment that said the date that I had specified of March 16th, which you can see in the video. Like I said, I'll put some links above. That was one of the videos that I made private, but I'm going to make it public again, which had to do with the potential end of the trial. And I said it would be around March 16th, because that's when Saturn is exactly opposite Trump's his Pluto. And I'm going to show you that again in this video. But anyway, that was March 16th. And I still think that's an extremely important date. So you got to put that date on your calendars, okay? And of course, with astrology, you also have to understand everything in astrology is on a bell curve. So the peak of the energy will be March 16th, but it could happen during a time period leading up to March 16th or after March 16th. It's just that the energy peaks on March 16th. So sometimes, the event will occur before it peaks or sometimes slightly after it peaks. So you always have to keep a wider window from that time period when it is at its peak, okay? But you'll want to be keeping that date in mind. So anyway, one of the comments said that they thought March 16th was too late. Now, I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. Just because I've been astounded at times by when I make predictions that don't seem to be in alignment with what's happening at the present moment. They do seem like that doesn't make sense. Why would it be why would the trial go all the way out to March 16th? So I'm not going to say for sure whether or not it'll actually last that long, but I did think it was worthwhile to at least look and see if there might be another time frame that might be more realistic than that and could just as easily happen. So I looked at the alignments of the planets and I came up with March 3rd, and I'll explain why I chose that date. So to start with, the inner chart is the day, January 13th, when the vote to impeach Trump occurred, okay? And that included 10 Republicans in the House who voted to impeach Trump on January 13th, okay? So I took the chart for that date of the vote for the second impeachment, and that's in the center. And the planet that I was particularly interested in is Mercury, because of the fact that Mercury does have a lot to do with everything to do with how we're communicating, voting, legislature, laws, because Mercury is a planet of communication, and that includes all kinds of communication, including legal documentation, including the way people vote, including what they speak, the speeches that they give, and the fact that Mercury is going retrograde in the middle of the trial. It's retrograde when it starts, and then it will go direct probably before it finishes. So the fact that Mercury is retrograde and changing directions in the middle of the trial is also extremely important. Because that will help in terms of revealing hidden information that might not otherwise be revealed. Okay, so that's actually a good thing in terms of getting to the truth. Now, what I decided to do in terms of looking at this chart was to say, okay, Mercury is at 8 degrees of Aquarius on the day that the House voted to impeach Trump for a second time. And on that same day, the moon conjoined Saturn, which is all about limitations. Saturn's is about putting on limitations, okay? So basically the vote said, hey, we need to put some boundaries on this. We need to put some limitations on this. We need to state for the public record that this kind of behavior of a president who lost an election, lying about it and inciting a insurrection is not acceptable. Okay, so that's Saturn putting on the boundaries. The moon there is the emotions and the subconscious, but it's also the people. And so wherever the moon is always pointing to something really, really important in a natal chart. So the fact that the moon was conjunct Saturn means that the way people are feeling is we need to put some limits on this guy, not just him, but everything to do with what happens in the future. Because if we don't set these boundaries now, then we've actually set a negative precedent by saying, you know, that by being complicit and saying, oh, well, okay, you know, if in the future any president doesn't win an election, he doesn't like that, you know, well, he can just incite an insurrection. That's okay. No problem. You know, I mean, let's get real here. Of course, it's a problem. We need to set some boundaries. And so people have very strong feelings about that with the moon conjunct Saturn, about setting boundaries and putting limitations on a person's behavior. Also, the fact that the sun was conjunct Pluto, and like I said, whenever a planet is conjunct Pluto, you're off the fence. You cannot be on the fence when a planet is conjunct Pluto. Pluto is an all or nothing energy. You're all in or you're all out. You just can't be in the middle, okay? So the fact that the moon was conjunct Saturn feeling we need to set boundaries and limitations, and the sun was conjunct Pluto. It's like, I can't be on the fence about this. I have to take a stand one way or the other. So that was really important. And then the position, the degree of Mercury is also important, because note that it's at 8 degrees. And I'll show you something really quick, because this has to do with astrology. And all right, so there's this interesting thing about astrology, which is called critical degrees. And the first degree, so like 0 to 1 is a critical degree because it's the beginning of a sign. And then the 29th degree is also critical because it's the end of a sign. Well, each of the other signs have other critical degrees. And so I just wanted to point this out really quickly. For the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, which is the one we're looking at, they are 8 and 9 degrees, okay? Just keep that in mind, because now we're going to go back and look at the chart with the understanding that these critical degrees are critical, okay? And you can just think about what that word critical means. You know, it's like crisis. It's like when you're telling a story, you have the crisis point. It's a point where things really come to a head, you know. This is a really important degree. So 8 and 9 degrees are critical degrees for Aquarius. So look at this. Mercury was at 8 degrees when the vote to impeach Trump a second time was made. And also note that the full moon with the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Leo was at 9 degrees, okay? Full moons are important because they do bring things to fruition. And usually whatever they're bringing to fruition, they do so within a time period around the time of the full moon. But honestly, because of the fact that they can trigger events just like a domino, you click that first domino and then it goes click, 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 click. Or it's like throwing a pebble into a pond and the waves ripple out. So it's like the clock or the calendar or something like a combination lock clicked into place with that full moon at 9 degrees with the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Leo, okay? So just keep that in mind. It's very, very important, the fact that Mercury was 8 degrees and the full moon was at 9 degrees, okay? Those are critical degrees. So something extremely critical was happening at this time. Of course, well, the fact that this was an historical impeachment vote, I mean, this will go down in history, literally. You know, our country is going to be, well, let's see, 250 years old, something like that. And, you know, after 250 years old, Donald Trump was the only person who has ever been impeached twice. And I had also read that the number of Republicans that voted to impeach him was also historic. Now, I didn't do any research to see if that was also true, but that's what I had read. So that's really interesting as well. So this is extremely historic, and you know, I certainly don't expect us to see that again in our own lifetime. May not happen for another 250 years. So that was definitely critical. All right, so the reason why I'm focusing so much on, well, first of all, you want to look at the chart for the day that the impeachment vote was made, looking at Mercury, because Mercury is going retrograde, plus Mercury does rule things like votes, and also because of the fact that the moon was conjunct Saturn at that very moment, and the sun was conjunct Pluto at that very moment. But also notice that Mars was at 29 degrees of Taurus. So again, we're looking at a critical degree and ending, okay? And what's super, super interesting about this is that the very day of the insurrection was January 6th. On that very day was when Mars was at 29 degrees of Aries and moved into 0 degrees of Taurus. And it was like that shift from 29 degrees Aries to 0 degrees of Taurus. That was like when the energy shifted, and they went from just being people marching and protesting to people actually just driving themselves into the Capitol, smashing windows, overcoming barricades, pushing down the police officers, chasing after police officers. One police officer was beaten with a fire extinguisher and ended up dying. All total, 5 people died that day. And since then, 2 have apparently committed suicide. 2 police officers have apparently committed suicide since then. It's, the facts around that aren't completely understood, but I don't think it's a coincidence. So I think that we can include those in the deaths related to the insurrection. That would be a total of 7, 3 of them being law enforcement people. So just keep that in mind, that was the day that Mars actually entered Taurus at 0 degrees of Taurus. That was the day that the insurrection occurred. Now, the day that I chose, March 3rd, is the day that Mars is at 29 degrees of Taurus. Okay, so now we're reaching another critical degree where we're reaching an ending. So we had the beginning at 0 degrees, and we have the ending at 29 degrees. And then the other interesting thing about this is that this day, March 3rd, is the day that Saturn reaches an exact conjunction. So Saturn is at 8 degrees 48 minutes of Aquarius, a critical degree, exactly conjunct where Mercury was on the day of the second impeachment vote, 8 degrees of Aquarius, 48 minutes, okay? The reason why I chose Saturn's position is because Saturn brings an ending, a completion. It's an ending energy. So something is going to be brought to conclusion. And it's also interesting that Mercury is conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius, because Mercury is communication, it is documentation. So whatever information is coming out, whatever documentation is coming out at the time of March 3rd, it's conjunct Jupiter. So it should bring some form of justice, okay? So hopefully that will be true. And let's see, I think now that I've explained why I chose March 3rd, I think I would like to go and take another look at the other chart that I was looking at before for March 16th and explain again why I still feel that March 16th is an extremely important date, and I'll explain why. So we'll keep our eyes on March 3rd. We also have to keep our eyes on February 17th, because that's the day of the exact Uranus and Saturn square. I'm trying to pull up Donald Trump's chart. Oh, there it is. Okay, so so again, I'll look at, when we know the exact timing that the trial begins, I'll look at that exact moment in time, look at the chart and see if I can read the chart to know what the outcome will be. And then secondly, we'll need to keep our eyes on February 17th, because that's the exact day of the first Saturn-Uranus exact square. And then keep an eye on March 3rd. That may be actually the day that the trial ends. And then I think we also have to keep our eye on March 16th, because that's the day that Saturn reaches an exact opposition to Trump's natal Pluto. And so what I want to explain about this And it's also interesting to me that the moon will be moving into conjunction with Uranus again, because Uranus is playing such an important role in these events. Because what happened on January 6th, when I had done readings, and I was, predicting what was going to happen, and I was looking at dates for January 6th and Inauguration Day, and because that was 2 weeks after January 6th. And I was saying that people were going to flip their lids on January 6th. That was when it was going to get kicked off on January 6th. And I literally used the term people were going to flip their lids because they weren't going to get the outcome on January 6th that they had hoped for. And sure enough, people did flip their lids and they didn't get the outcome they had hoped for. And but it turned out to, in a way, even though it was a deadly insurrection and a horrific event, it turned out, I think, in a way to ultimately bring about a good outcome, because it gave warning that obviously the security forces were not ready for that. They weren't ready. They weren't prepared, and they really needed to get a wake-up call. And that it turned out that that's what January 6th was. And so on Inauguration Day, there were 30,000 troops surrounding the Capitol complex and pretty much shut down Washington, D.C., certainly that area of Washington, D.C. And, it's interesting because Uranus is the planet of unpredictability, and Mars is the warrior, which includes the military. And because Uranus is unpredictable, we never know exactly how that Mars-Uranus energy is going to manifest itself. It turned out manifesting itself as 30,000 troops surrounding the Capitol. That's massive. That's unprecedented. But it also turned out to be extremely favorable. That's what was needed from the very beginning. And it's also interesting that Trump brought all of this about through his own karma. And, we've been waiting. We waited 4 years for his karma to come to fruition, and we're getting very close now. I mean, obviously losing the election was his karma coming to bear, but now we're seeing even more karma coming to bear. So the reason why I just mention all that is because on that day of January 6th, Mars had entered Taurus and was moving toward its conjunction to Uranus, and the moon was exactly opposite. And I knew that opposition was going to be extremely important in activating the energy of Mars and Uranus, because the moon is emotions. It's the people's emotions and subconscious, and they flipped their lids. They lost their ability to think rationally. They were fully functioning on hyper emotion and activated amygdalas and subconscious programming, because they'd been programmed for months to believe that the election had been stolen. So yeah, the fact that the moon is also going to be in conjunction with Uranus is important. There's something that will occur on this day, not just because Saturn is opposite Pluto, which is in itself extremely important. It's putting a limitation on his power. It's other people putting a limitation on his power. But the fact that the moon is also moving into a conjunction with Uranus, which will then also form a T-square with the Saturn-Pluto opposition, that's why I say these people are actually the ones who are going to bring him down. I mean, he's brought his own self down, but he didn't do it all by himself. It's really these people. If those people hadn't shown up on January 6th and raided the Capitol and did everything that they did, that has now led to 7 deaths, he would be impeached. They would just say, oh, it was just, a rambunctious speech, Oh, there goes Trump again. Oh, he's such a kidder. Oh, look at that Trump up there, with his crazy speeches. He's such a kidder. Well, you can't laugh about it now, can you? Nope. Because those people did show up, and they did raid the Capitol, and they did lead to now 7 deaths. And I do think it's important to include the 2 people who have apparently died from suicide, because it's not a coincidence. There's a reason. There's a reason why they have died. Either because if they truly did commit suicide, then it has something to do with guilt. Either guilty because they participated in some way, or guilty because they couldn't stop the raid. Or as somebody in my comments suggested, maybe it wasn't suicide. Who knows? But it's not a coincidence that they have died as well. So I definitely think we need to put that number at 7 deaths. And so now with the moon moving into conjunction with Uranus, you get more people flipping their lids. And again, it's important to understand that everything in astrology is on a bell curve. The dates that I give you are the dates when the energy is exact, okay? So it will be exact on March 16th. That's when the energy peaks. I think we will probably see something happen on March 16th, because moons are flashpoints, okay? So the moon moving into conjunction with Uranus on the very day that Saturn is opposite Pluto and forming a T-square with the Saturn opposition to Pluto, it's a flashpoint. So I really do think we will actually see something on March 16th, but always keep in mind, everything's on a bell curve, so it could actually happen just before March 16th or just after March 16th. But honestly, looking at that moon moving into conjunction with Uranus, it's going to make people go crazy. Something's going to happen on March 16th or just before March 16th or just after March 16th that's going to make people go crazy and flip their lids again. And, we've been seeing it rolling out all over the place. It's just crazy. Oh my goodness. Okay. So this pretty much sums it up. I think I'll leave it at there. And I will bring you this weekend. I want to do a video on the Aquarius stellium, because I talked about, videos on money and love and relationships and all that, and got a lot of feedback saying, yes, we want that stuff. And so I want to do one on the Aquarius stellium and one on the Aquarius new moon, and then also one on the issues with the Trumpanzees. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. And thank you for joining me. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you for clicking like on this video and sharing with friends and family on social media. Thank you for clicking the bell so you can get notifications, and for all your comments. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.